that I'm expecting from the winter storm in our area, from snow, which is not the biggest part of this thing by any means, the sleet, the freezing rain, the wind, and we can talk about any questions that you might have that maybe I didn't cover. So I'm going to go here for a while, and then in about 4 or 5 minutes, I'll go back to the comments and kind of scroll through and see what some of the common questions were. I know everybody wants to know specific about their hometown, but we have 470 people watching right now, so I cannot answer 470 hometowns. As much as I would love to do that, it's just not fair to everybody else. So we will go and kind of try and give you all that info first and hopefully answer your questions before you even ask them. But thanks for being here for this chat on a Saturday. First things first, where is the storm now? What can we expect? Well, it's moving as expected right now, circling through Arkansas, Missouri. They're getting the back edge snow here. And much of the South at this time, it's really a rainmaker across Tennessee, Alabama, places like Georgia and Mississippi are getting in on this now too. You might have noticed over the last couple of hours a couple of flurries. Did hear of a few reports, even in Greensboro, Mount Airy, other places, that there have been a few flurries across North Carolina. That was something we told you about over the last couple of days, that the forcing today might allow for a couple of random snow showers. And that's developed, but they haven't been any big problem, and they won't be. All of us have a winter storm warning, and you hear winter storm warning, you think, okay, this means I'm going to get a ton of snow. That's what I think usually, but what it really means is any sort of winter hazard that is really going to be significant, and that includes ice, and it also includes snow and sleet. Unfortunately, for most of us, our bigger impacts are not going to be the fun, fluffy snowfall. It's really going to be more in the lines of sleet, and especially the freezing rain concern, which could down some trees and power lines and make for really nasty travel. So unfortunately, the way this has trended over the last couple of days, we've really been trying hard to call it a winter storm and not a snowstorm, because snow is a tiny fraction of this storm. In fact, most of this is going to be ice and not so much in the way of snowfall. Let me walk you through the timeline. You'll notice we're pretty dry early in the morning. We should have nothing going on if you're waking up before sunrise. There really shouldn't be anything from 6 to even 7. It's probably pretty quiet. As the morning wears on, though, by 7, 8, and 9, you can see this. This is when we start to see those bands of snow moving our way. And the event will start as snow. The bottom line, though, is that it's kind of not that long that will stay snow. And the reason for that is even though we're super cold in the 20s, you're going to have this layer of warm air that's moving our way above our heads. So what happens if you get a little bit of warm air in between the cloud and the ground, you're going to be able, and I realize I'm not showing the graphics here, but there they are now, that you can see those graphics. Apologies for that. What we're seeing in this futurecast for tomorrow morning is you have the snow initially for a couple of hours, and then you start to see this pesky changeover. We see that in a lot of our winter storms. What happens is that you get a little warmth between us and the clouds. And what that does, it takes the snowflakes and it melts them. When they get melted into a liquid drop, you can never get the snowflake back. They only get formed up there in the clouds, okay? So when you have those liquid drops, two things can happen. Number one, that liquid drop can refreeze into an ice pellet before it hits the ground. That's what we call sleet. Or if there's not enough time for it to refreeze or the air's not cold enough, it can still go all the way down and then it freezes on contact. That's when you get sheets of ice on the roof of your car, on your house, on the trees, on the power lines. That's what we call freezing rain. So freezing rain is the regular rain that freezes on contact. That's the one that's more severe. That's what we don't want much of tomorrow, but it does look like we'll get a little bit of both. So here's 8 a.m. We did it before. Here's your snow in the morning. Probably get about 1 to 2 inches in most areas, a little more north and west, a little less south and east. By midday, most of us are seeing sleet. By midday, most of us are seeing sleet in the triad. Farther north and west, you're still getting snow. But midday, most of us are getting sleet at that time. Those are those little ice balls I told you about. By the afternoon, that's when we start to see a transition into freezing rain. This model has regular old rain and temperatures above freezing south and east. I don't buy that. I think it's going to take longer to warm up. But bottom line, by the afternoon time, that's when most of us will be experiencing icy weather accumulating on the trees and on the roads and on the power lines. And then by the evening, things are winding down. So this is all kind of ending by midnight, with the precipitation maybe ending as a couple of wet snow showers. So bottom line, you start off as snow, you switch to sleet, you switch to freezing rain, end as snow, it's a big day, and all the while you're having winds that are gusting over 30 and 40 miles per hour. So it's a tough one. We have upgraded our risk of freezing rain. This is across the board, something that we just feel like we need to let you know about. I'm not guaranteeing that you're going to have bad freezing rain in your neighborhood, but impacts are so severe when this happens that we wouldn't be doing our job if we're not letting you know it's possible. So in the foothills, it's not very likely you're going to have really bad freezing rain. In much of the Triad, though, especially from Burlington to Asheboro to Troy, down to Charlotte even, and Durham and Greensboro, we could have some significant ice. And that usually it takes about 1/4 of an inch of ice to cause power outages and power problems. We could have that in those areas. That's a big chunk of our area. I do tend to think that Asheboro is probably in the worst spot when it comes to this and might be worse positioned for power outages. Greensboro a little on the edge, Reedsville a little on the edge. But we have to be prepared for that. So just know that ice could add up pretty quickly, and that's where your higher risk of power outages is going to be on Sunday. And it's mostly for the afternoon and for the evening. Again, with the wind that's going to be up there as well, that makes it a little bit worse. How much snow are you going to get? Not much. Okay, not much. We were pretty low with our totals initially to start, and we've even taken those down a little more because there's not going to be that much snow on the front end before the warm air gets here. So for Greensboro, High Point, Lexington, Burlington, probably a 1 to 2 inch snow and sleet. This is not a very fun snow either because you mix it in with those ice balls, so it's really pretty icy. It's not so good for snowmen or snowballs, or even for, I guess sledding would be pretty fine. But other than that, kind of tough to enjoy. Farther north and west, maybe 3 to 6 inches up that way. Highest amount by far in the mountains where they still could get 10 inches. Lower amounts south and east. So those are your sleet and snow totals and potential. Here's the part I really feel like I haven't talked enough about, and I want you to know about it. By tomorrow morning, we're going to start to see the winds get up there. 20 to 30 miles per hour. And as we go throughout the day, maybe even higher than that. So some 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts are on this model. I think that's too high. I don't think they're going to be quite that high, but we do need to keep an eye on it. The winds should be worst in the afternoon. So that should be when our winds are the worst and the power outage concerns are probably the worst. By the late evening, we'll get a break. And then the next day, the winds will kick back up again to that 30 mile per hour range. So factoring in the ice, factoring in the snow and the heavy sleet and all of that, you add winds on top of it, and I really think there are going to be some widespread power outages. So that's a high impact. Power outages should be a high impact. Travel is really bad because you have ice on the road, you have sleet on the road, and maybe, like I said, a couple of inches of snow. So the roads will be tough. And then, how long is it going to last like that? Well, we're probably going to stay pretty cold for several days. So it's not just tomorrow that the roads could be bad. A lot of people have asked me, well, what about on Monday? Can I travel around on Monday? The crews do a great job when it comes to the main highways. So the interstates, US 52, 220, I-40, all these kind of places that are the really main roads of our community, they should be fine, I would imagine, by Monday, probably at least by midday. The secondary roads and the neighborhood roads, a lot of them don't even ever get touched. That's just the way we do it down here. And I can't imagine they're going to be much better at all on Monday and maybe even Tuesday. So we're going to have to be really patient. We've done this before. This is not our first go around. We do winter storms in the Triad. We know what to expect, but it doesn't make it pleasant. So unpleasant weather is pretty likely, not just for a day, but maybe lingering for longer than that, especially unpleasant if you're in the dark. So all of these are things to consider when it comes to a little stress test from winter weather. Timeline for tomorrow: snow in the morning, then sleet, then freezing rain, winds gusty all day long, and a really big mess for sure. Those roadways should be tough to handle. I'm going to leave this up here for a while. And while I do, I'll start to go back into some of your comments and see what you're saying about the situation. Other questions? Tish, yeah, kids are out of school in Guilford County at least on Monday and Tuesday. I know every county is a little bit different. Some people saying it reminds them of last year. So there was a bad ice storm last year. That's true. In Guilford County especially, there were power outages that lasted 4 or 5 days in some cases. Rockingham too, I believe. I was one of them. I didn't have it for about 3-4 days or so. Other questions? Some people saying they're ready. That's good. Are people bashing on my Bills? Go Bills. Let's not be doing that. Other questions. Yes, Jim Cantori is here. Not for snow, definitely for ice. Ham cooking spray on the satellite dish. I have not heard that. That's interesting. I guess it would make it harder to stick. Other questions. A lot of people asking, how does this compare to the ice storm in the early 2000s? For some reference, I believe that was 2002. The ice totals, the freezing rain total was around 1 inch or higher in those cases. That's really, really bad and widespread devastation. This should be more along the lines of 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. So I don't think it will compare in scope to that one, but this could still be a bad ice storm for a lot of folks. So it's something to keep an eye on, okay? Other questions. Where are you when the lights went out? Not sure. No, I don't know Jim Cantori. Yeah, Adam, I love that commercial of that with the milk and bread. That is good. That is very, very good. By the way, so we talk about what is sleet, what is freezing rain, all these things, and it's not always obvious to a lot of people because you're not a weather person. It's okay not to know. Snow is easy to explain. Snow is just cold air all the way, but when you have this little layer of warm air, so rain is the same thing. It's just it's warm air. That's easy. Liquid, frozen, all that stuff is pretty easy to understand when it comes to snow or rain. But when it comes to sleet, things are a little bit different. So in the wintertime, actually, pretty much all of our precipitation, even rainfall, starts as snowflakes. And then when things warm up, they melt. So sleet, it starts as snowflakes, but it melts then into water, into liquid drops of water. Well, if you have a very thick layer of cold air below that warm layer of air, what happens is you're able to return that liquid water drop into an ice ball. Ice pellets is what we also call sleet. You've heard this many times in your life. If you're driving around and you're in your car, you hear this pinging noise, like someone is throwing tiny marbles at your windshield. It's the same idea on the windows of your house. You'll hear it kind of pelting. That's sleet. A lot of times people call that freezing rain, which is not accurate. Freezing rain is different because the only difference is you still have the warm layer, but it's usually a little thicker. And then you also have a thinner cold layer at the ground. It's still below freezing. Maybe we're 28, 29, 30, 31, but it doesn't have time to refreeze. And that's way worse because if we have a little tiny drop of ice hit the ground, it just bounces away. Maybe it goes to the grass or something. And it can accumulate like snow, but it's not a huge big problem. Freezing rain is because then, oh, the rain falls on the tree, it freezes on the tree. Oh, the rain falls on the ice, then it freezes on the, on the power lines, on the trees, on the roads. It freezes on everything in sight. So freezing rain is the worst. There is a difference between the two. And so how do we have this going on tomorrow when we're in the 20s all day? Well, we start as snow, and then we go to this where the warm air moves in, and then we have more warm air moving in, and so that's kind of our transition. Some folks in South and East counties might eventually transition to rain, but I don't think most of us will warm up quite that much. Hopefully that's helpful to you. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that is easy to understand. I'll throw this up there. I do think our biggest problems are for dangerous travel. Azaria has a great question. Could the sleet last longer than expected? I think that's a distinct possibility. That really could happen. And if it does last longer than expected, then we don't really get in on much of the freezing rain. And then we don't have as bad a power outage concern. So that's what we want to hope for. We want to hope for it being more sleet than freezing rain. That would be fine. And so that's a good thing to think about for tomorrow. Am I calling for some next weekend too? I'm not calling for anything at all. Let me clarify. I haven't thought a lick about the weather after this storm. This has pretty much been my life for the last 6 days. after tomorrow, I'm probably going to take a nap, and then we can talk about next weekend. But this should be a refresher, and please, everybody, keep this in mind. If you see a little snowflake icon popping up on your phone 7 to 10 days in the future, keep in mind, we do not ever know winter weather details much more than 3, let alone 5 days in advance. So if you see something like that, just your instinct should be, oh, hey, something might happen. It should not be, oh, we're going to get a snowstorm. Maybe, but even we don't know either at that stage in the game. So just so you know, remember a couple of days ago, this was looking much more snowy than icy. And I was saying, let's hold off on numbers. Let's hold off. At that time, it was looking like all of us would get a foot of snow. Weather Channel app was saying 5 to 8, 12 inches, whatever it was. That's why we kind of pumped the brakes a little bit, because we're knowing that things always change with our weather pattern, and that's okay. Other questions? Tracy, yes, be thinking of essential workers. That's right. Timeline here. It will be starting in the morning between 5 and 9 a.m. That's when the snow begins for us. And then as we go into the middle of the day, we're going to see it change over to sleet, and then we'll see it change over to freezing rain. A lot of people asking about late next week. I'm not going to answer any questions about that because I don't know anything about it. Not just yet. How long could it stick on the roads? I think a couple of days. I do think it could be a couple of days. Yeah, brine helps. Brine helps. Brine is a good thing to put down, especially when it doesn't get washed away too badly, but it definitely is helpful. Kenneth, yes, hail. Good question about hail. Hail actually only forms in thunderstorms. So hail is actually formed from very quick upward motion in the middle of a thunderstorm. Stephen, you're right. You're right about that. Other questions? Timeline is the same for the foothills, Beth, but you actually are a little luckier in the sense that in the foothills, you should end up with a little more snow than the rest of us and a little less than the ice, okay? So it is different from place to place. If you're just joining a kind of a what's changed today factor, ice looks worse than snow. Wind gusts look like they could be pretty bad, gusting over 40 miles per hour at times. So not what we want to see, but it's what we're dealing with. It's what we're dealing with. That's right, John. Go Bills. Let's go Bills. I think the secondary roads will be a long time before they're better. When will it be safe to drive? I don't really know. I mean, it really depends on what road you're on, if it's a hill, if it's flat, what's your experience, what's your car. I can't answer that as a catch-all question. Michelle, I don't know. I don't know. You'll really have to check with your airline and with the airports. I think they'll have a tough time tomorrow. They don't usually like to mess with winter weather all that much, or with windy weather either, but we'll see. Carol, it looks actually more fluffy to begin with because it's so cold. But again, you might only get a couple of hours of that, 1 or 2 or 3 hours. All right. Any other questions? We've been at this about 15 minutes or so. Joe wants to know how much ice. We can certainly go over that again. I'm concerned that we might see 1/4 of an inch of ice or more in some areas. That would include Asheboro, Troy, Siler City, Burlington, Greensboro, Lexington, over to Charlotte, Durham even. This is a wide-ranging event. And part of the problems with a wide-ranging event is that if we do go dark, if we do have power outages, crews have a big job where they have to fix power for a lot of people, all right? So they are sending extra crews. Duke is prepared for that, and they're mostly coming to North Carolina. This is a South Carolina storm too, but hopefully they're in good shape. People asking about different storms. 2014, we had about 3/4 of an inch of ice then. So this should be a little bit less. You know, the worst ice storms are where you stay freezing rain most of the time. or even all of the time. This time we are mixing it with sleet. We're mixing it with rain. Sorry, not rain, snow. So it hopefully should be a little less severe than that. But it does cut your totals of snow and all those things. People want to see snow. Sure. Not much. I'm sorry. I know how badly people want snow. I get it. It's been a long time. If you have a 3-year-old kid, they haven't really seen much of any joyful snow in our area, and it's frustrating. However, I do think you could get a sleety, snowy 1 to 2 inches in much of Greensboro, High Point, Lexington, more like 2 to 3 farther north, less than an inch south. It's not so fun, I realize, but that's just kind of the way that it is. Chris, hope you're doing well. Forecast for Monday. So Monday is going to be a very cold day again. We'll have temperatures in the 20s in the morning. We'll have highs in the 30s. And then what we also find is it's pretty windy still. So it'll be windy as well on Monday with gusts still around 30 miles per hour. That might make it hard for crews to get power back on, all of these things, and the roads will probably stay pretty bad. We have sunshine, and the sun is good to help melt some stuff on the roadways, but not if it's like a glacier of ice and all of that. Ashboro, I have concern for you, buddy. I think maybe, Keith, you might only have about a half an inch or so down there in Ashboro, and much of it might be sleet too, so I wouldn't be too excited if I'm an Ashboro snow lover, I'll put it that way, and I know it's been a tough go of it also down there. Black ice. Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, we'll have black ice on the neighborhood roads most days next week because you see how cold it is. And again, to reiterate, I have no clue what'll happen next Friday. I haven't looked at it at all, and I'm not trying to be lazy here. I'm just kind of prioritizing. There is a weather pattern signal that looks pretty strong for next weekend, but we'll take that as it comes. I just hope it's not on the weekend. we can deal with it. Dwayne's ready for whatever. The main message, as I'm going to sign off here, the main message is this. Are you prepared to lose power for a bit? Are you prepared to stay off the roads? If you answer yes to that, you're good to go. And if you do have to get somewhere, and maybe you're working a hospital or you work at a news station, do the best you can, be as safe as you can, and be prepared in case you get stranded on those roads. So storm begins 5 to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We will have coverage. We have our newscast tonight at 11. We have our Good Morning Show with Ed Matthews, Christian Morgan, Tracy McCain. They'll be here for you 5 to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, 4 hours. So they'll have coverage for you. We'll have some special digital coverage for you throughout the midday and the evening as well. Of course, we're going to have football on television a good chunk of the day too. But yeah, we're ready for it. We hope you're ready for it. It's not fun. It's probably not going to be a very fun storm system, but we'll deal with it. You know, we do this a lot here in the Triad. We are good at disasters because we get them. Take care, everybody. I'll have more updates for you later on tonight and tomorrow.